Have you ever stopped and wondered what it was really like to be a teacher, say, 80 years ago? Before smart boards, before the internet, when the challenges and the rewards were just as real, but they looked a whole lot different. Well, let's step back in time together and spend a day with a first-year teacher to see what her life was truly like. So, here we are. It's October 1940 at Woodrow Wilson Junior High School in San Diego, and we're about to meet 21-year-old Betty Carringer. She's fresh out of college, only 4 months in, and get this, she's walking into the very same school she went to as a kid just 8 years earlier. Only now, she's the one standing at the front of the classroom. So, what did it really take to command a classroom back then? What were the pressures, the joys, the day-to-day grind? We're going to find out by following Betty through one single, typical day, from the moment that first bell rings to long after the last student has gone home. This right here, this was the philosophy that landed Betty the job. In her interview, she told the principal, art isn't just about making pretty things. Nope. It's about teaching a whole new way of seeing the world, of solving problems with creativity. And that idealistic, passionate vision, it got her hired right on the spot. But all that passion had to meet the cold, hard reality of the era. Her starting salary was $1,400 for the whole year. It's a pretty stark reminder of the world Betty was stepping into, where the pay for a job this important was, well, modest to say the least. Now, like a lot of new teachers back then, Betty didn't just get to teach her favorite subject. She had a split schedule, juggling 2 totally different disciplines. And in her mind, one was a necessity, and the other, that was her true calling. This was her daily balancing act. Her English classes, which were bigger, they paid the bills. The challenge there? Making dry stuff like grammar fun. But then you have her smaller art classes. For Betty, that's where she felt alive. The goal there wasn't just to teach, but to actually nurture creativity and see the real potential in every single student. Okay, so how do you make grammar exciting for a room full of 8th graders? Betty, she turned it into a game. A student would pull a sentence, figure out what was missing, a noun, a verb, whatever, and then fill it in with the most creative word they could think of. All of a sudden, what used to be a collective groan turned into engaged laughter and real learning. But when that bell rang for art class, you could feel it. Everything changed. The whole atmosphere in the room just became different. Students who were maybe fidgety or quiet in their other classes suddenly came alive. They were more focused, more themselves. This was Betty's world. And this is where the real magic happened. She noticed a student, Tommy Sullivan, who was kind of the class clown in English and struggled academically. But in art, he had a real gift. So she pulled him aside quietly and gave him this incredibly powerful piece of encouragement. She validated a kind of intelligence that, let's be honest, the rest of the school day probably overlooked. And that's the thing, right? The most important parts of teaching aren't always in the lesson plan. The moments that really stick happen in the spaces in between, in the hallways, during breaks, over lunch. These are the conversations that can totally change a student's entire perspective. Betty just got this, instinctively. Instead of hiding out in the teacher's lounge, she'd often eat her lunch on a bench right out in the quad. And why? So she could just watch her students in their natural habitat, to understand who they were as people, not just as names on a class list. It was all about teaching the whole kid. It's during one of these lunches that a really pivotal moment happens. A shy art student named Marcia Chamberlain finally works up the courage to approach her. And she has this simple but huge question, one that every young person with a secret dream has wondered. Do you think I could be an artist someday? And Betty's response is just perfect. She doesn't make any false promises. She just offers real validation and practical hope. She tells Marcia that passion and paying the bills, they don't have to be enemies. A simple piece of advice like that, don't give up on the things that make you come alive, that could absolutely shape the rest of Marcia's life. So the final bell rings, the students pour out of the school, and you'd think, okay, the day is winding down. But for Betty, and really for teachers everywhere, this is often when the second part of the workday is just getting started. The kids were gone by 1:30, but Betty's day was far from over. She was still in the building for another 3 hours, cleaning up, grading papers, and sitting through meetings. And even after she locked up her classroom at 4:30, the work came home with her. She was still finishing up lesson plans late into the evening, around 9 o'clock at night. And that after-school time, it wasn't just one thing. It was a whole mountain of responsibilities. We're talking grading for 126 students, planning engaging lessons for 5 different classes, getting ready for parent conferences, going to faculty meetings, and even trying to organize an art show. The unseen work was just immense. So after all of that, how do you keep going? On her long bus ride home and later that night, Betty thinks about her day. And this is where we really get to the core of what it means to be a teacher. Finding this profound meaning in what is, by any measure, a totally exhausting job. This number is everything, 126. That's how many students Betty was responsible for. But to her, it was never just a number. It was 126 individuals. She thought about Tommy's hidden talent, Marcia's big dream, another kid's struggle. Every single one was a whole person she was trying to help guide. And this, right here, captures the central paradox of teaching, doesn't it? Looking back on her day, the grammar games, the spilled paint, the stacks of grading, the quiet, life-changing conversations, Betty felt it all. It was completely draining. And yet, it was the most fulfilling work she could ever imagine doing. So as we leave Betty Carringer at the end of her incredibly long day back in 1940, it kind of leaves us with this question. Think back to your own school days for a second. What was it that made a great teacher stick in your memory? Was it the lessons they taught from the book? Or was it those moments they made you feel seen, valued, and like you were capable of absolutely anything?